Hello. So I'm going to be talking about what to do when a new guide shows up in your field. I know there's a lot of information out there in the spiritual new age communities about spirit guides, and a lot of it tends to be focused around, your guides will communicate with you through numbers and through symbols and through synchronicities, and all of that is true in my experience, and in what I witnessed within clients and just people in my world. That is very true. However, I kind of wanted to talk about more specifically what happens when a specific guide, a particular guide shows up in your field and is initiating communication with you. Because in my experience, when that first started happening to me, I didn't really know how to respond. I didn't really know what to say or do, or how I was meant to begin interacting with, what can often be quite majestic looking beings which almost can incite what feels like fear, but it's really awe and reverence and a sense of like, oh my gosh, this is very much a being from another realm that is presenting itself to me, and it's, got just this air of divine beauty around it, and something that, when we're walking down the street or when we're walking to the shop, we're not going to see a being really that looks like that often. So I wanted to kind of focus on that specifically, and we'll see if anything else kind of wants to come through around it too. So, often we do have this kind of mainstay group of guides that are built up of these different archetypal forms and, will present themselves in various different ways. But we also have guides that kind of come in and out, or may just appear for a particular period of your life or a particular initiation, and aren't just going to communicate with you through numbers and colors and things like that, who are going to require something different from you, are going to require something less fluffy from you, not to say there's anything wrong with that kind of narrative around guides, but often the initiations that they carry are so much deeper, so much more cosmic and sacred and profound than just seeing a sequence of numbers, which in itself is a beautiful thing. But, there's often deeper levels which are going on as well. And so usually they arrive to support us in some kind of level of our growth and to mirror something back to us. And often that is a particular initiatory step that we might be traversing or walking through. And they can appear in all types of different ways, and for example, an experience I had with a new guide. So I was working with a mentor at the time, and she did tell me, she was like, you're gonna have a new guide appear to you. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And I was sitting with a friend, and I hadn't seen this new guide appear yet. I was sitting with a friend, and I was really kind of deepening into my shamanic work, and I was, she was quite curious about it, and I was sort of explaining all of this stuff to her about it, and I just saw this guide appear while I was kind of mid-communication with her, and saw it clairvoyantly, and it was still to this day, one of the most like majestic, magnificent looking beings I have ever seen. So like royal and sovereign in the way that it held itself, and it really took me back, and I didn't want to appear like I was not with it, shall we say. And so I didn't say anything to her, but I was kind of just trying to like hold it together whilst this being had kind of made this very almost quite dramatic appearance. And what I realized that it was inviting me to do when I, sat with it at later stages was it was inviting me to frequency match it. It was inviting me to mirror those same tones that I was feeling from it within my own field, to be able to resonate with it and mirror it, because it was teaching me, it was showing me about, you know, these various different things that I was perceiving it to have that also exist within me, but I wasn't kind of able to see them myself until I saw it in someone else. And then you're able to then mirror it back, if that makes sense. So when you experience something like this, you're really going to want to tune into like your empathy and your mirror, you know, activate those mirror neurons. And when it's showing itself to you, start to feel that same thing that you're feeling from it within yourself. So I was going, oh my God, this being is so majestic and royal. But what it was inviting me to do was to recognize those feelings, those sensations, those tones and frequencies, to activate those within myself, because that's what was required of me for my next stages of my initiation and my evolution. And so I would say pretty much always that is going to be the first stage of interaction with a guide, because it's like if you're talking to somebody in person, if you're feeling really, really different from them, or you're feeling like there's this big separation gap between you, you're not going to hear what it is that they're saying, and probably what you say to them is not going to come across in the way that you want it to either. There's going to be a gap. So you have to bridge that gap within your own field, within your own frequency, in order to be able to open up those waves of communication, those deeper cosmic waves of communication that are presenting themselves, and in order to be able to exchange that data. You know, it's like with me, with my clients, if I'm sitting in a position of feeling like I'm different from them, or feeling like I'm above them or beneath them, the session isn't going to work, you know? It won't work. I have to be in my heart. I have to be in a place of empathy. I have to be in a place of receptivity, of listening. And then I can feel what it is that they're feeling in their body. If I'm somewhere else, if I'm not present, if I'm too in my mind, we're not going to be able to bridge that gap. And so, you know, you could use that as an example for communication with anybody, really. But when we're coming into a deep communion, that is so necessary in order for that communion to be able to prosper, and for us to be able to gain what it is that we need to gain from it, and give what we need to give for it to be what it needs to be. And also bearing in mind that there is something profoundly like sacrificial about having a guide step into your field. They have gone through a sacrificial process in order to connect with you. And I mean that in the higher forms of sacrifice, not in, you know, the sort of shadow forms of it, but the higher forms of sacrifice that exist within the higher planes. And it's the same when we are teaching, when we step into the role of teacher, which all of us do at different times. We are imparting something of our own. We're imparting something of ourselves. And that's a sacrifice. And that's like a beautiful, really high form of sacrifice. And so it's the same with a guide when they appear. Also, something that can happen is they may be there to give you something, as in an object or something that you may have once possessed in another realm, in another dimension, in another life. They may be there to grant you this gift, this object. And this happened to me once with a being that was in my field, and you know, I was going through very specific initiations at that time, and I kept seeing this being in my field, and it kind of made me feel I wouldn't say on edge, but I was very wary of this being. Like, I was like, why is this being watching me? what does it want kind of thing. But I didn't engage in any form. I feel it just appear here. It's like, you called? I'm like, no, I'm just explaining something, but thank you. So it's like, it felt almost like a kind of, it inspired a sense of fear within me. And I don't believe necessarily intentionally, but that was how I responded to it. It was a very cloaked kind of figure. And, these are all the kind of things that you start to read as you go on. It's like often a robed figure is very symbolic of a deep mystical being who is there to initiate you, but a hooded robed being can also be like, oh my gosh, I can't see you look kind of scary, because they're unknown to you. And so I kept seeing it kind of almost like patrolling the parameters of my energy field, and I was a little bit just very discerning of it. And that's important. You want to be discerning of beings that appear randomly in your field. That's important. And then it approached me when I was in the middle of a kind of spiritual moment, shall we say. And it approached me and it said, I've got something to give you. Not through words, but through feeling, just through vibration. It was sharing that vibration with me if I want to give you something. And again, I was discerning. I was sort of like, do I want to receive this? Is it in my highest timeline for me to receive this object? And I got a very strong feeling of yes. And I said, okay, I accept. And it dropped a sword to me, like etherically. And, when you're kind of in between worlds, you can still feel the weight of things, for example. And it dropped this sword into my aura, and it was like I kind of caught it, and I was like, oh my God, like this, this is really heavy. And I then had to go through, a various series of initiations of what this sword meant and, why it was being given to me at this time, and various different lives where I had held this sword before, etc. And I've had that with different items and etheric objects, which have been kind of, it almost feels like a feeling of restoration, like they're being restored to you, they're being returned to you, as opposed to like, because for it to be given to you, it would have had to have belonged to you in the first place, if that makes sense, in another plane, in another dimension, in another life. So, there's always that kind of, it's not like you're getting something new, as it were, rather something old is returning to you in a new way. So I've had various different experiences with things like that, with being given like sort of spiritual armor and different kind of devices for divination and whatnot. There's a million, and I'm sure other people have their own, fantastic kind of stories of different ways they have experienced this phenomena as well. And so as well, you can experience particular deities showing up as guides. And some people are very particular about this. And I think it's important to be aware that, there can be guides who are not true guides, who are false guides, just like in this world, we can have false teachers and false prophets and things like that. Exactly the same in the etheric world. You can have beings that approach you that are not genuine, and quite often they will take the form of like a deity to kind of approach unsuspecting people who, are wanting to connect with different dimensional planes. And so, just always being aware, always using your discernment. If a being comes to you and they are giving you quite strict orders, if they are kind of trying to open up almost like a parent-child kind of dynamic or relationship, those things are really kind of indicative of a being that is maybe trying to get some kind of hierarchical dynamic operating within you, and not a sort of divine spiritual hierarchy, but one that is kind of existing within the lower astral planes. And so, you know, always just being conscious of that. And also, that's the thing about false guides, is that they can give you really good information, but then there will always be elements of untruths within it. You know, there will always be things which maybe don't sit quite right, or seem like they're maybe not of the highest truth, you know. So just always being aware. And often part of our grander initiations are encountering false guides and being able to discern, okay, well, that's what a false guide feels like, and this is what a true one feels like. And so with deities, I think that can happen quite a lot. And, you know, it's just important to be discerning. So I had an experience with a deity. I have had quite a lot of experiences with different deities, but this specific one was with Hecate, and she's known as like a sort of goddess of witchcraft. And she had she'd never been in my field very much before, but she came to me for a very specific underworld initiation, which was, you know, very kind of shamanic, and required me to travel through these different spaces within the underworld and kind of reclaim lost parts of myself, and, you know, pass through these different kind of entities that were existing within that plane. And I think it's important to note that if you know, there's that saying of like, God will never give us more than we can bear. And I think that there's a lot of truth within that, you know, that if you are being presented with a certain initiation, to know that you can handle it, to know that even if it seems like it might be frightening, that it's all about facing your fear. So much of just the groundwork or the foundational levels of initiations are about facing your fear and overcoming them and transmuting them and turning that lead into gold. So just always being aware that when an initiation is presented to you, often it's because you are ready to step through a certain door. And it will always feel like, okay, you know, yes, I might be afraid, but you know what, I can do this kind of thing. And guides as well can, you know, very often be galactic. I would say that it depends. People are so different. Sometimes the first guides that show up for people are galactic, you know. Sometimes the first guides that show up for people are ancestral. Sometimes the first guides that show up are nature beings, nature spirits. It really just depends on your own kind of cosmology and where you have been and, you know, where you are going. And it's dependent on so many things. Again, with galactic guides, it's important to discern that they are actually who they say they are. And I think we're seeing a lot, especially with the whole kind of starseed phenomena, we are seeing a lot of lower astral beings impersonating galactic guides right now, you know. And yeah, I could do a whole video on that. And so again, important to be discerning. But galactic guides, you know, can hold such amazing pathways within them and can hold such amazing kind of reflection for how we see the earth and the sort of journey the earth is going through, and also, you know, our different lives on galactic planes can also be just so enriching to reconnect with and to remember how cosmic we truly are. Also, one that I see a lot, which I think people, in my opinion, tend to misunderstand a lot, is I see the words fae and fairy mixed up a lot. And I personally, the way I experience it is those are very different beings, maybe some crossover, but there definitely is differences between fairies and fae and the way that they move and the way that they operate. And how I experience it is there is so many different types of fairies, and there's many different types of fae within that species, if that makes sense. I can hear them saying we're not a species, and I'm like, all right, okay. Within that, it's almost like an order. That's almost the word that I'm hearing, which is quite interesting. But within that kind of dimensional existence, you know, it's like there's so many different energies and forms and archetypes that exist. You know, it's just look at humans and how different we all look and how different we all are. Yes, we might all be of the same in terms of our DNA, but there's vast differences as well, you know. So yeah. Yeah. They're like, thank you for explaining that. So and so, you know, nature beings as well are very common guides that you might find. Tree beings, I love to work with the trees. You know, there and listen, when I say there are so many different types of nature spirits, infinite, and all so different, and all with such different teachings and lessons, you know, some being more mischievous, some being more kind of wizened and wise and old, and you know, but they all have their power, and they all have their, you know, their thing to kind of offer you. And I think that it's quite sad, but also, you know, a necessary part of our evolution that so many people focus on wanting to connect with galactic guides when there are so many amazing nature beings and nature spirits that we can connect with as well. And I think it's sad that that's sometimes overlooked, because the magic that you find within the nature realms, within the nature kingdoms, is incredible, like truly incredible. And yeah, I think it's important to also, you know, if you are one of those people that's very galactically focused, to also remember to ground into this very beautiful, magical earth. And you know, another one is animal guides. I won't go into that too much because I have a whole video on animal guides and how amazing and important they are, and how they kind of communicate with us so beautifully on the etheric planes. Another one is plant guides as well. So anytime you're working with like rose or mugwort or any herb, any flower, any plant that you are doing any kind of you know, deep work with, whether that's a dieta or just, you know, including it in your practice every day, you're also working etherically with the spirit of that plant. And, you know, mushrooms, ayahuasca, you're also working on the spiritual level with that plant consciousness. And again, that's a very powerful way to connect with that sphere. The plant sphere is etherically. You know, we don't always have to even be ingesting a plant in order to connect with it and in order to receive something from it or receive its teachings. It's not necessary to always be in physical communion in order to receive that. In many sessions I've had, Mother Ayahuasca comes through and grants a blessing, and that person hasn't necessarily drank ayahuasca. So another type of guide that I wanted to mention as well is wisdom keepers. And they will often appear in a kind of Native American form, in a sort of ancient African form, and maybe sort of Aborigine or Maori form. And you just feel the codes, the deep shamanic earth codes which come from them, and they will, you know, often again it's that case of sort of frequency matching them and being able to attune to whatever it is that they have to share with you. Also, recently I've been working with a lot of kind of Celtic wisdom keepers. They can appear in so many different forms and have such deep, beautiful wisdom to share. And so really it's always about tuning in, connecting with your heart, radiating whatever it is you're feeling from them. If you're like in awe and reverence, almost try and like direct that back to yourself and try and work out where it is that you are maybe feeling that they might be above you or superior to you. That is one of the biggest ways that we get entrapped, either by false guides or that we are unable to receive the information that a guide actually has to share with us, is by placing them on a pedestal. Yes, they might exist in or within a different dimensional plane from us. It doesn't mean that they are superior in any way. It just means that they have a different set of codes to share, and likely those codes already exist within us. They're just sharing with us so that they can be activated. And so it's really about tuning in, connecting with the heart space, and just as when you see someone smile, you want to smile, or when you see someone cry, you want to cry, it's almost like tuning into that empathic sense. And empathy is a spiritual gift. It is a deep part of clairsentience, and it is a psychic sense, and so the more that you are able to tune into that in your own life, the more that you're going to be able to tune into that with your guides as well, and receive the wisdom and the teachings, and share your wisdom and your teachings with them as well. So thank you for connecting in with this video. And if you have any questions or would like me to elaborate on anything related to spirit guides, then just let me know. Feel free to leave me a comment or send me a message. And yeah, thank you. And I will see you soon. Goodbye.